got some folks working on that right now. All right, that's extra loud. Great. So, like I was saying earlier, my name is Matt Pontus. I'm Assistant CEO with the County of Santa Barbara, and we're happy to be here tonight to talk a little bit about the cave fire and a little bit of winter preparedness. As we start out tonight, I want to first start and recognize that we have County Supervisor Greg Hart here tonight. We also have Wendy from Congressman Salud Carvajal's office. And I also want to do a special thanks to Thomas Teague here with Direct Relief for hosting our facility tonight. Thank you very much. Assisting us tonight with our sign language is Katie Voice and Robin Babb. We also have interpreters here tonight, Carla Martins and Simone Rivadera, which I was trying not to butcher her last name, but they're going to go ahead and give us a quick message.
Buenas noches.
Good evening.
Mi nombre es Carla Martens y mi compañera Simone Rivadeneira. Estamos aquí por parte de Comunidades Justas para proveer interpretación simultánea del inglés al español.
My name is Carla Martins, and this is my partner Simone Rivadeneira, and we are here to provide simultaneous interpretation from Just Communities.
Unas guías para trabajar con intérpretes. Les pedimos que hablen a un paso moderado. Si están hablando muy rápido, haremos esta señal.
A few guidelines when working with interpreters. Please remember to speak at a moderate pace. If you are speaking too quickly, we will make this sign.
Igualmente les pedimos que hablen en una voz alta y clara. Si necesitamos que suban el volumen, haremos esta señal.
We also ask that you speak in a loud and clear voice. If we need you to speak up, we will make this sign.
Todas las voces son importantes y por eso les pedimos que hablen uno a la vez. Si necesitamos recordarles, haremos esta señal.
And remember that every voice is important, and we ask that you only speak one at a time, and if we need to remind you all, we'll do this sign.
Eso es todo. La mesa con el equipo se encuentra a la entrada. Si lo necesitan, por favor, pasar ahí. Gracias.
That will be all. The table with the equipment is outside at the entrance, so if you need any, please go ahead and we'll be right there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much from the ILRC and with our partners. So tonight, this is our list of topics that we're going to be going over. A quick introduction. We're going to talk a little bit about the cave fire, give an overview. You're going to hear some expert reports from the BEAR and WIRT teams. We have a watershed and flood control here tonight with us. We have a brief winter weather outlook for you. We have some public safety considerations for you tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about community notifications, personal resiliency, and our steps moving forward. And at the end, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions to our panel and our folks here tonight. And with that, I'd like to introduce County Supervisor of our 2nd District, Supervisor Greg Hart.
Well, thank you all very much for coming out tonight. There's some important information that we want to share with you, as Matt described. I want to recognize my colleagues Kyle Richards from the City of Goleta Council and also James Kiriako, who are also both here representing the City of Goleta. We all know that we just went through a very serious event with the cave fire, and I want to take a moment to really thank all of the folks in the first responder community, County Fire, the CHP, the sheriffs, all of the different agencies who responded so heroically and so quickly to such a significant and scary event. You know, the system in California for mutual aid within the fire agencies and all of the public responders is the most sophisticated system in the world. We unfortunately have the most dangerous conditions in California from wildfire, and our system of managing that from CAL FIRE all the way down to the local agencies is really sophisticated. And the people here that are doing that work are consulted as experts around the globe. So we're really fortunate, but we're also very lucky when it comes to these kind of events. And as we all know, we got a little break from the weather while this event was happening, and now we potentially have a threat from that same weather. We're going into the winter season, and I know all of you are very interested to hear from the experts tonight about what potentially is ahead. We do not have all of the answers yet, but we want to be completely transparent with you with all of the information that we have at the time, to give you the best opportunity to be prepared and to work together to protect our community. That's the most important thing that we want to emphasize at the County of Santa Barbara is personal safety of all of the members of our community, and we want you to have all the information you need to make smart decisions. So I also want to thank Direct Relief International for hosting us in this wonderful community meeting. They are an incredible partner that make this facility available for public meetings like this, and I want to thank all of you again for attending, and all of the staff and all the different county agencies who are working together very hard over time during the holidays to protect us, whether it's the fire folks, the CHP, the sheriffs, all of our police agencies, county flood control, everyone that is working really hard, dedicated, committed people to keep us all safe. So thank you again for coming tonight.
Thank you, Supervisor Hart. Next and first up, I would like to introduce you to Mark Harwig, our fire chief here at Santa Barbara County. He's going to go through a series of information on the Cave Fire.
Thank you, Matt. I have Daniel Berticelli as well. He's our PIO. He's going to start by just sharing a little bit, some specifics about the incident itself. And then I'm going to get into talk about something a little more technical. I was wondering why I drew the straw to talk about the technical report on this. And all I can tell you is that the efforts, both the federal and state efforts, are led by the Forest Service and CAL FIRE. And we're going to hear a little bit tonight from the WERT team, talk about what a WERT team is, and hear from the WERT team who's here right now doing some work following the Cave Fire. I'm going to introduce Daniel Berticelli. He's our captain, fire captain, public information officer. Also happened to be an eyewitness on scene throughout the Cave Fire, and he's going to share some specifics about the fire itself.
I have to lower this. Good evening. Like Chief said, my name is Daniel Berticelli. I'm a captain PIO with the Santa Barbara County Fire Department, and I was one of the initial responders to the Cave Fire. And I will give you a brief overview of what I saw, what I experienced, and what came to be of the Cave Fire. At approximately 4:30 p.m. on November 25th, Los Padres National Forest firefighters as well as Santa Barbara County firefighters got reports of a vegetation fire on East Camino Cielo Road and Painted Cave. Am I hitting stuff? No, you're good. Oh, all right. We had known that there were going to be heavy sundowners in the area that evening through coordination with the National Weather Service, and it was even known to us that there was going to be a potential public safety power shutdown in that area. So we were definitely on guard. We immediately dispatched a full vegetation response along with the federal U.S. Forest Service vegetation response and began attacking the fire up on the Camino, up on top of the hill. That fire, that sundowner wind began to surface, and the fire began to get into alignment with topography and burn down towards the city limits, down towards the San Antonio Creek area as well as the upper Cieneguitas area. I consider this fire, although it was a large fire, it was a huge success. We utilized the statewide mutual aid system, and within 6 hours, we had over 100 fire engines on scene, 800 firefighters, as well as air assets, dozers, and hand crews. We were lucky the weather cooperated with us throughout the duration of this fire, and we were pleased that no one was injured, no one was killed, and we only lost one outbuilding that was destroyed by the fire. The fire was determined contained on December 14th at, I believe, 5 p.m., Rehabilitation work is being done in the area right now by the U.S. Forest Service, and as well as our dozer operators are assisting in the lower elevations. And I believe it was just considered controlled yesterday, correct? Yes, so it was just considered controlled yesterday. The total acreage was 3,126 acres. Initial reports was it was over 4,000, but with some additional more high-tech mapping, we were able to do a couple days into it. That number dropped. And with that being said, that is basically the cave fire in a nutshell. So thank you for listening.
If I could just share a couple of eyewitness accounts myself, a couple of things. One is, and I know direct relief doesn't need to have any more attention. They're a huge part of this community, specifically related to the fire. We had 5 ships assigned to the fire, 5 airships. These are night-flying airships with the capability to drop water at night. We have what they call medium capacity ships, and we have large capacity, or what we call heavy capacity ships. The capability between the two is significant. A heavy would be what you might have heard referred to as a fire hawk. It's a Black Hawk that's been helicopter that's been modified to drop water specifically. And then the medium ships are the Huey, the Vietnam era ships. They're the Hueys, the Hughes aircraft and Bell aircraft. In this fire, we had, just to talk about the difference in capability, we had the Firehawk on one side of the fire, one flank of the fire, if you will, and that matched the capability of the other 4 ships put together. I bring this to your attention because Direct Relief heard about the efforts of the fire department and really a ship used throughout the county, from Carpinteria through Montecito all the way up into Lompoc and Santa Maria, about the fire department's effort to purchase a used Black Hawk and then convert it to a Firehawk. And they came along and said, we want to seed your efforts with $400,000, and then we want to lead the efforts to generate more money. Currently, we're over $1.1 million in the efforts to outfit, convert this ship. It's allowed us to take now this ship in partnership with the sheriff and send it to Arista, which is a conversion facility in Alabama, and it's currently being converted, and we expect to have it back by January, February of this next year. So I wanted to point that out because the Firehawk that we had on this last incident and the cave incident came from LA County, and it's great to have LA County's aircraft, but the problem is if they have fires and emergencies, you just cross your fingers and hope that they're available, and so having one here for ourselves, it will be huge. So, and then I got to really kind of drive along with some of our staff along Painted Cave Road in Camino Cielo during the fire. And I have to tell you, the amount of work that went into the Painted Cave community, by the community, to create defensible space was allowed fire engines to actually park at the structures that were being bumped very hard by the fires, the terrain and the fuel. It allowed them to stay there and actually hunker down at the homes overnight. You can never know whether or not a company feels comfortable staying at a structure when it gets hit hard by a fire front. It's always up to the commander or the captain or the company officer of that engine company. And in this case, they all stayed along. They were both local and San Luis Obispo resources that stayed along at those homes. And if you, we had the opportunity to take some of the electeds up the next day and look at the work that those crews did. But it was just nothing short of incredible. A lot of courage by a lot of men and women who put themselves between the fire and the communities and the people who stayed in those communities during that incident. Following the incident, there are a couple things that happen. First and foremost, we as the county and then the service providers, and you're going to hear from all of them today, they're on the list from the Sheriff's Department, Public Works. We're going to have our colleagues from the Weather Service and others. We start looking at what happens after the fire. What kind of emergencies, what kind of issues should we expect after the fire? The Forest Service comes in as a matter of practice and does a report and study, and they specifically or primarily look at the federal lands affected by the cave incident. And this incident, about half, a little bit less than half, 46% of the burned area of the cave fire happened on federal lands. And so when the Forest Service comes in and looks at the impact to those lands, they look at the natural resources, they look at the cultural impact, and they look at the values at risk in the federal lands associated with the fire. Then a little over 50% of the fire happened on non-federal lands. That would be state and local government, watershed, and others. Sorry about that. So they look at the non-federal lands, and so that's about half of them. They look at some of the same things. I will tell you that when the federal report, and we're going to get right into the actual reports, and we're going to hear a little bit from the WERT team today. We do have the district ranger here, Pancho. We had a really good briefing from them on the federal report this last week, and we'll talk a little bit about what that was. It was actually the BEAR report. It's the Burn Area Emergency Response Report. I will tell you, I've seen a lot of BEAR reports, and my opinion of a BEAR report, from my experience, is they're typically a formality. I will tell you, the efforts that went into this report were not a formality. Yanni, who is the expert, the lead on the BEAR report here at the Los Padres, spent a lot of time in the field. He spent a lot of time communicating with his colleagues nationally, locally, and nationally, and had put together just a phenomenal report. The program itself is designed to identify these post-fire threats. Human life and safety and property is always a high priority, and again, they're focused on federal lands. And then their goal is to present these recommendations to those that might be interested, or essentially that might be impacted by it. And then if there's any immediate action that needs to be taken, we have that information very quickly. The BEAR report really looked specifically at two drainages and that many of you are familiar with here, the Maria Ignacio drainage and the San Antonio drainage as well. They look at a few different things. They look at burn index, and when they looked at burn index, they're looking at how severe the burning was on the soil. You might have heard them referred to on the news as kind of a moonscaping. People talk about how completely the ground or the environment burned, and then a less severe burn might have skeletons of some of the chaparral and some of the lighter fuels. And so we're going to hear some reports today, but what the good news is, we didn't have the kind of burn intensity in this fire, and you didn't have to do you could do this by looking at the burn. We call it kind of a dirty burn, and in fact, some of the miscommunication or some of the misidentification of the acreage in this fire was associated with the severity in which the fuel here burned, and so we had a lot of areas within the perimeter of the fire that didn't really burn at all. So it didn't burn the entire inside of the perimeter. And so if you take a look at the entire outside of the perimeter, it was closer to that 4,100 acres that was being reported. But then when you, after the fire, and you give it a few days and you can get some resources over the fire, you can look and get a more detailed acreage on the fire. But the good news is that we didn't see the kind of severity here in this fire that we have in recent fires in the state, and so that was a good that's a good sign. And they look at burn index. They look at the type of area and soil that's associated with it, especially when you're looking at flooding and debris flows. And then, of course, and we're going to hear from the Weather Service in just a little bit, all of those things are dependent on how much precipitation you get and where that precipitation is, related to the debris and vegetation that it impacts. And then, as I mentioned, we talk a lot about VARs, which are values at risk. What we're looking at as in the county here and some of our other partners, we're looking at now knowing this and knowing what we have, knowing the burn severity, knowing the geology that we have associated with it. Now let's look at what would be at risk with certain weather events in certain drainages, and you're going to hear a little bit about that today. Again, specifically focused on the Maria Ignacio and San Antonio drainage. We're going to go on. There was a couple, next slide, there you go. So in the Bear report, when we talk about values at risk, in addition to life and property, we're also looking at some of the infrastructure, some of the flood control and public works infrastructure. We're going to hear from them in just a little bit. But we do talk about values at risk, and these are some of those specifically in the Maria Ignacio and the San Antonio drainage. The Watershed Emergency Response Team looks at some of the same things. We found out today, I'm not as familiar with that process, but I found out today that they spend just a little bit less time looking at cultural and natural resources that you would see more in the forested lands, and they spend a little bit more time in the built environment. When we start talking about WERT, because we have the lead for the WERT team here, which is a Watershed Emergency Response Team, I'm going to go ahead and introduce him and have him just walk us through some of the efforts. I do have to tell you this, and I don't want to put him too much on the spot, but in an effort, as the supervisor said, to give you as much information as we have, but know that the information is still coming in, this is just, he's still working on it. So their team is here, and they're still working on it, and we knew that we were going to be here talking with you all tonight, and that they were here. So we're going to put them on the spot. Peter, if you don't mind coming on up and tell us a little bit about what your work is, and then I'll wrap it up and pass it on to another colleague. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, everyone. Pete Caffrey at CAL FIRE. I work out of the Sacramento office. I'm a forest hydrologist, and it's a pleasure to be here today. My team is sitting in the back. We have 3 geologists, and we've been working on the cave fire since Monday. We got here Monday afternoon, and have kind of built on what the Forest Service Bear team did. Watershed emergency response teams have been around in the current form for about 5 years. We've done about 20 fires. We don't do every fire that's more than 500 acres like the Forest Service does. We do generally fires that have a high risk for life safety and property threats from flooding and debris flows. And the county asked us to take a look at the cave fire, and we're glad to come down here and do that for you. We are co-led by the California Geological Survey. We don't do this alone. We do it with licensed professionals, licensed geologists, oftentimes licensed civil engineers, from the Department of Water Resources and the Regional Water Quality Control Boards. We kind of expand up or contract on these teams depending on how big and complex the fires are. For the Thomas fire, we had a team of over 20. For this smaller fire, 3,100 acres, we've had a team of 4. So we build the teams based on the size and complexity of the fires. Just want to say that we are working on the report still. We have investigated and built on what the Forest Service did, used some of their preliminary information on soil burn severity, and redid some of their flood analysis, used debris flow maps, and have checked out the fire carefully. We had some initial concerns, but things are definitely looking good, and we are continuing to write our report. We did an initial briefing to county officials this afternoon and enjoyed doing that. And we will be finishing our report very shortly and having our California Geological Survey supervisors and CAL FIRE senior staff review that before we release it. So basically, I think that's what I have to say, Chief. If there's any questions, happy to entertain that.
Thank you. And I know Peter said he could stay around for a little bit if you have any questions as well. One of the things that I took away from both the Bear report and the work team, just the preliminary work that they've done, is they're out hiking the drainages. And so when they start showing pictures about them hiking essentially from almost the headwaters is above 154 all the way down into Tucker's Grove and the freeway, it's a good sign. It means that they're not just looking at maps and they're not just listening or recalling on what they're looking at on the video. They're out looking at exactly what they have. So thank you again on behalf of a grateful community, your services, and of course the Forest Service as well, and the work that they're doing. I'm going to get out of the way. I'll be around a little bit later. I'm going to pass it on over to Jim from Caltrans District 5.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. Pleasure to see everyone. My name is Jim Shivers. I'm the Caltrans District 5 Public Information Officer. We're based in San Luis Obispo. Santa Barbara is actually one of 5 counties in our district. We also encompass San Luis Obispo County, Monterey County, Santa Cruz County, and San Benito County. But we do have a very strong presence here in Santa Barbara County. We're very proud of the relationships that we have developed with our colleagues, and I just want the public to know that our Caltrans management, our public information office, our team of engineers, our maintenance forces are all available 24/7 when any of these major incidents break out. We were there for the olive mill incident every day. We were responsible for the K fire with our maintenance and engineer team, as well as other areas around our district. I'll have more to say a little bit later on about some of the things that we have done in regard to the K fire, but I just wanted to just mention briefly that we work very closely with our friends at the CHP, the California Highway Patrol, and we have a tremendous relationship with the CHP. In the event of any highway closure, that would be a decision that would be coming from the CHP. Upon that request, our maintenance forces would then set up the road closure, and then we would follow the lead of the CHP and allow emergency vehicles through these closed areas whenever possible. As typical when we have these major events and weather forecasts that lead up to these events, our maintenance forces are on call 24/7. Our Caltrans team of engineers are also on call 24/7, as well as our management staff, myself in public affairs. And so just feel assured or rest assured that we're there for the public. I don't know if I was going to talk about all of this right now, Kelly, or later. I can. So as you can see on the slide behind me, the burn area covers a 3-mile section identified by our Caltrans engineers and maintenance on Highway 154 from Painted Cave Road to San Antonio Creek Road, and that has been basically the brunt of where we've been working, where we've been responding in recent days. Since the cave fire, we have restored several sections of guardrail, 8 sections to be exact, and we were very pleased, by the way, to open up the highway as quickly as we did. And we're very proud of that effort by our maintenance and construction forces and the contractor that we brought in, typically under an emergency contract. Contractors come in instances like this where we just basically set aside all the paperwork. We have contractors ready to go. They come in with their teams and basically get right to work. We've been restoring drainage facilities. Typically, much of our winter storm prep is done in the summer months. When it's dry, we can get in there, we can clear things out, but that is an ongoing effort as we try to restore as many drainage facilities as we possibly can. We will be, as we issued a news release just today, we will be reducing the westbound passing lane on Highway 154. So you're going to see that K-rail or that barrier that basically separates vehicles from workers, but we essentially need to reduce that passing lane so that we can have access to monitor the slope, and if there is any slide material that comes down, there's a place for that to go, and it also allows us to do additional work on trying to create spaces where rockfall can basically rest in the event that it should come down. So we'll be installing about 1,000 feet of K-rail to facilitate this lane reduction. As I said in one of our meetings yesterday, as far as the local folks, I think having one lane open on 154 is better than a full closure any day of the week. So with that said, we would ask all the local folks, as well as all the tourists going through the area, drive safely. There can be Caltrans vehicles out there, contract vehicles out there as well. Surveyors, geotechnical engineers, a lot of people out there working for the public benefit. CHP, tow trucks, so just a big dose of patience as you drive through those sections of 154. And the photo basically behind me kind of shows, again, similar to the photos you saw just a few moments ago about what's left behind when trees and brush is burned away, and that's our big concern with our engineers, is that they're monitoring a couple of things. We want to make sure that the mountain, the slope, stays intact, and if it doesn't, and if the water is running down, we want to make sure we can do as much as we can to make sure that the water goes to places that don't put people in harm's way. So I think I'll have some more to say, I think, a little bit later on, and I'll pass it on to the next speaker. Thank you.
All right. That worked out well. Next, I'd like to bring up Tom Fayrum. He's our Director of Flood Control with Santa Barbara County, and he's going to lead us through some additional items here.
Big white button, all right. Good evening, everybody. My name's Tom Fayram with the County Public Works Department, the Flood Control District, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the work that we've done since the cave fire. So our first question when a fire breaks out is where is it? Which drainage is it in? Because that's going to guide the actions that we have to take. We also maybe call the fire department and say, hold it to that drainage and don't let it go further. And they did a really good job of that here, so we're thankful for that. So first thing, find out where the fire is, and then start developing our plans as to what we're going to do. In this case, as was mentioned several times, the watersheds of particular concern are the Maria Ignacio and the San Antonio Creek drainages. So measures taken to date, and pardon me for looking back just so I make sure I can follow the slide, is finding out that it's in San Antonio and Maria Ignacio. Obviously, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clean out our debris basins that are in the area, get them ready. This is the San Antonio debris basin, which is up above Tucker's Grove Park. And you can see, if you look in the lower side, you'll actually see the excavator. They're starting work while there's still smoke in the background. I think from the time the fire really got somewhat to a point where we could go in, and the first rainfall was 30 hours. I think that's a record. 30 hours from fire to the storm, and so a very short time. But fortunately, we keep our basins in a state of readiness. However, our maintenance plan states that when there's a fire, we go in and whistle clean it out. The other thing we did, if you've driven by Tucker's Grove Park, or been in the park, you might have seen a large grizzly rack structure. Same structure we did after the Hasacita fire. That was 10 years ago now. And so we put that measure in to catch a lot of the floating debris, the trees, any rocks if they come down, to try to keep the area downstream open. We also installed a similar rack at the Maria Ignacio main branch debris basin site. And then we also did stream clearing from San Antonio Creek, in San Antonio Creek, from the basin all the way down to Highway 101. We're next going to be moving into Maria Ignacio on Monday with the California Conservation Corps crews, and we'll be doing Maria Ignacio and the same thing from the debris basin down to Highway 101. And then we've also, I'll note that we have identified to put yet an additional debris rack on the Maria Ignacia East Branch Basin. So that work will be starting up shortly as well. So this shows the work that was started, worked into the night, and then the rain the following morning. So we completed the fire readiness clean out for the San Antonio debris basin just in the nick of time. As I said, 30 hours doesn't give us a lot of time. Debris racks at Maria Ignacio and Tucker's Grove. Again, those will be monitored. Very common practice for us. We did it after the Gap Fire, Hasacita Fire. We do see an increased loading of woody material that comes down. And so we want to try to trap that and control it and take it out before it gets downstream and hangs up on bridges or blocks up a stream channel. After the first rains, we got quite a bit of material into San Antonio. So we've finished that clean out today. A lot of fine grain material, but that's all been hauled off now. And of course, we're looking at forecast of rain for this week that Mark will talk about here shortly. So after each storm, every single storm, if there's enough material to warrant going in there, we will go in there and we will clean that basin out just like we did, in Montecito and other fire areas. So our future actions, we're going to monitor the creeks. If there's deposition of material, whether it be in the debris basin, down through the urban area, down in Atascadero Creek, Maria Ignacio and San Antonio flow in Atascadero Creek and then out to Goleta Slough. Anywhere, if there's material that needs to come out, we will mobilize and we'll get that out. We will, I said, take additional measures as necessary. I just mentioned we just identified putting that additional debris rack in on the East Branch of Maria Ignacio Creek. It really had only a couple hundred acres burned, but we think it's worth to put that measure in. And then I would note also at the county corporate yard, sandbags are available, as they are every winter, and urge you that if you feel you need that for your individual property, that you can take advantage of that. And then lastly, if you haven't, you can go to our real-time rainfall website, rain.cosppw.net, and that's also on our county hydrology page, the link to it. And then you can watch the exact rainfall falling just as we do. There's also a link for some webcams, and there's actually a webcam that is set up on the San Antonio debris basin, so you can see if there's material in there, and then you'll see the equipment, cleaning it out just as we did there. And I think that finishes my part.
Thank you, Tom. Next, I'd like to bring up Mark Jackson with the Weather Service, who's going to bring us up to date on what's happening with our weather, current and expected.
Thank you. So before I begin, I want to start off by thanking all of you for being here tonight, and also to thank our valuable partners from not only the county, the city, state, federal, from fire to water, flood control, emergency management. Santa Barbara County, I have to say, we serve 4 counties in our area, going down to Los Angeles County and up to San Luis Obispo County. And really the work that we observe and our partners throughout Santa Barbara County is really a model through the years. And it all is kind of taken for granted sometimes, of how hard they work and the partnerships. But I think this meeting right here tonight is evidence of how the effectiveness of doing that. So what I wanted to talk about real quickly first was give you kind of a backgrounder on debris flows. And keep in mind that every burn area is different. And even within a burn area, you have different responses to rain within that burn area. So you have the work of the BEAR team, you have the work of the WERT that go in there and really analyze where the threats are within a burn area. But Again, every burn area is different, and we have to evaluate that each time. And unfortunately, with our long fire seasons, we don't have a lot of time to respond to these things. We keep on getting these fires in November and December, and the work that they do and the quick response that they do, and you heard that the work just started working on this on Monday. The paint has not even been close to drying yet, so there's still a lot of work to be done. But I wanted to give you a quick primer on what debris flows are, but with the understanding that the work going on with the cave burn area and really trying to analyze where the threats are within that burn area. But what we see with the fires is that this is a simple graphic that on your far left shows an unburned area, and what you have is you have the litter on the surface, you have the vegetation that protects that. The rainfall, as it falls, it hits that vegetation, hits those trees, it hits that before it hits the surface. And that really helps kind of absorb everything. The soil is better able to absorb that rainfall. And so you do get some response in an unburned area, but not nearly as much as what you get within a burned area. So then you have the fire that comes along. And as you heard Chief Hartwig say, each fire burns differently. It burns hotter. And the hotter it burns, the worse then that soil becomes at absorbing water. So a word called hydrophobic, and that hydrophobic literally means afraid of water. So as you get heavy, intense rainfall that hits that soil, it doesn't penetrate the soil, it runs off the soil. And as it runs off the soil, and depending on the steepness of the slope, that's when it determines how much debris it carries with it down the watershed and any sort of debris that might cause any damage. So a few facts about debris flows, and again, keeping in mind every burn area is different, but just everybody to let you know kind of what debris flows are. We've observed through the years that they're initiated with high intensity rainfall. So keep this in mind. If you have a storm that produces some moderate rain over several days or so, that's not such a bad thing. As a matter of fact, Tom Fayram, I'll never forget this, back a couple of years ago when he said that when you want to get that vegetation regrowing back in a burn area, because the sooner it can regrow, the less than the threat as the debris flows. But he said an inch a day keeps the debris flow away, okay? So that means you're getting this nice gentle rainfall in the burn area. You can start getting regrowth. We're seeing a lot of that in the Thomas burn area. Over 85% is regrown within the Thomas burn area. But when you get a lot of that rainfall in a short amount of time, that's when you start having problems. So depending on the slope, depending on how steep drainage is, you can then get debris that moves, you can get mud that moves, and in some cases it can move very fast, and it continues to travel down the slope, and depending on then the steepness of the slope, it can continue beyond the burn area, and that's one thing to keep in mind. They're not landslides. Physically, a landslide is much different. A mudslide is much different. We can't forecast landslides. They can happen when it's not even raining. Many times it happens when the soil is saturated and you get these rock falls. But debris flows can happen even without any previous rain. It can be the first rain of the season. It can be the first storm of an entire series of storms that can produce a debris flow. So the warning system that we use, we work with the USGS, who, again, part of the partnerships, the BEAR team includes work from the USGS that go in there and they analyze each one of the drainages as far as the threat for debris flows. And they go in there and they determine how, based on a certain rainfall rate, how likely material is to begin moving within that drainage. And what we've seen is that that's when you reach that threshold, the very first indications of material moving might occur. But what we have found through the years is it takes that excessively heavy rainfall, and we're getting better at being able to understand when we can have a certain rainfall rate that would produce a debris flow that may be a threat to life and property. So it's very important to us not to issue false alarms and alert people unnecessarily. And so we're getting a much better idea. There's research is ongoing as we speak, really, to have a better idea of when to really let people know that this is a very, very, very dangerous situation. So what we have within our, let me go ahead here. Oh, I got to go back. All right, sorry about that. So let me go over the progression of what you would hear on the media, in the news, for instance, in terms of our progression of a watch and a warning. So a day to 2 days ahead of a storm, we would issue a flash flood watch. And what that means is that we're gaining confidence that we have a storm or series of storms that could potentially produce some flash flooding, and within the recent burn areas, potentially debris flows. So if you happen to be identified by local officials to be in a residence that is vulnerable to a debris flow and are told to evacuate, this would be the time to do it, okay? When you have that amount of time, the ready, set, go, you have everything set, now would be the time to go. Don't wait until the storm is actually on you. Oop, I knew I would do that. Sometimes I wish I had eyes in the back of my head, because anyway. Then the next thing we would do if it starts raining, but we see rain that's not too heavy, we issue a flood advisory. So a flood advisory will not set your phone off. It will not activate the tones on TV and the radio. It's essentially saying this is nuisance flooding, okay? So you get some water in the roadways. That could be dangerous. Say if you're driving too fast, you have to be aware that there may be some high water areas, but you just have to be careful. So it's considered nuisance, so not considered life-threatening. Then if we see either imminent or occurring flash flooding that could produce a danger to life and property, and then we would issue a flash flood warning. That is where you would then have that alert on your phone, similar to that Amber Alert, that wireless emergency alert. You would also then see the alerts on TV. The emergency alert says the EAS. And that means that we have flash flooding or within a recent burn area, possible debris flows that are either occurring or very imminent. And these are a very difficult thing to really get ahead of. And so many times, it's one thing to forecast how much rain may fall. It's another thing to forecast how fast it's going to fall. It's even a third thing to then forecast what might happen after that rain falls and what debris and material will move when it falls. So it's still a very difficult thing. So sometimes we may be issuing this as we get the report that it's happening. So in those kind of situations, if you've, again, been identified as being in an area that is vulnerable to these and have been told to evacuate, you would have been evacuated by then. If you haven't evacuated, that's where you need to just shelter in place. But also keep in mind there's other areas around the county that could experience high water, very rapid water running across low water crossings. You could have, for instance, across 154, and some of the values at risk across 154 that you would have to be very careful of. So just as a quick summary here, a couple of slides on the winter outlook. We've already had some rain this year, and that graphic that you see on the left shows you how much rain we've received across the state. We're the lucky ones down here if you want to consider, if you like rain, and this has been good rain. Okay, we haven't had really any impacts at all with this past rain, but you can see down in Southern California we've had anywhere over 300% of normal for the last 60 days, which is a good thing. As far as El Nino goes, ENSO stands for the El Nino Southern Oscillation. You all should know that NOAA stands for the National Organization for the Advancement of Acronyms. So ENSO, don't forget about that. That's El Nino Southern Oscillation. So you have El Nino, you have La Nina. El Nino typically brings more than above average rain through Southern California. We're considered neutral, and what that means is the waters within the Pacific aren't too cold, they aren't too warm. It's kind of right in the middle. It's typically a little bit difficult to predict what might happen for the winter season when it's in that situation, but typically what we see is that it's more below average for the season. But so far right now, we're above average in Southern California. But keep in mind, it only takes one storm to make a big mess. So our outlook here, you see on the left, that's the forecast for the next 6 to 10 days where you see those dark greens. That's where you see higher than average possibility, or a possibility of above average precipitation for from that period from officially it's December 22nd to the 26th. And over the next week, we do have a series of possible storms of different intensities. And right now, it's difficult to tell as you get further out into, say, Christmas Day and beyond. There is a potential that one of those storms could be a little bit heavier than the other, but just stay tuned to the forecast. Again, it's not how much rain falls, it's how fast it falls, and so that's one thing that we're always looking very closely with and keeping the counties or the county officials up to date on. And then as you go out into January and March, you see that it's difficult in terms of the confidence as you get further out, but for the most part, what's indicated there is below average precipitation as you go out through January and March. So the concerns that we have for this season, again, it only takes one storm. We have to keep a lookout for these high-intensity rainfalls, very high-intensity, short-duration rain. Don't never forget that inch a day keeps the debris flow away. We have to watch out for these extended periods of rain where we have multiple storms back to back to back to back. If you were around here in 1995 or 2005, you remember what that was like in January and February 2005. That's when we can create problems where the soils become saturated and anything that falls runs off. So that's one thing we always have to be aware of. You've heard of the term atmospheric river. An atmospheric river is a very long area of water vapor that stretches across the Pacific Ocean. You've probably heard of the Coconut Express. That is one variety of an atmospheric river. Every precipitation system that we have that is significant is associated with this long river of moisture. But you'll hear that mentioned on the media quite a bit. And there's different varieties and different strengths of those. And when we do have one that's very strong, that's when it really gets our attention. Stay aware, be informed through the internet, your favorite news and media outlet, and of course, the readysbc.org, and then making sure to sign up for Aware and Prepare to get those alerts. And I think that's it. I'll hand it over.
Thank you, Mark. And next, I've got a quick safety message from Commander Huddle with the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office.
Good evening. How's everybody doing? Thank you for coming out. On behalf of Sheriff Brown and the entire Sheriff's Office team, I would like to thank all of you for being here tonight and participating in this opportunity to learn about protecting yourselves, your families, and our community. So I just want to give you a quick rundown of what the Sheriff's Office is doing when we have these potential threats to the community based on weather as a result of the fire. So our job is to work with our county partners, public safety, and the Weather Service to do real-time storm decision-making to evaluate if there's any threats to the community. So we take all that information, we talk about it, and we assess the threat, and then we decide whether or not we have to do any actions. So we have the technical experts, we have all the people who are here tonight, all sitting at the table, and what we're really looking at is the predictions from the Weather Service on how they're going to impact the community and the specific neighborhoods of the area below the fire scar. So as we're doing that, we're gathering real-time information and we're making decisions. If and when we choose to evacuate, in deciding whether or not we are going to order evacuations, the decision team and the Sheriff's Office always uses 6 core concepts to guide our decision-making process. Number 1, ensuring public safety. Number 2, evacuate only when necessary. Number 3, evacuate only those areas that are necessary. Number 4, evacuate for the shortest amount of time possible. Number 5, return people home as soon as possible. And number 6, provide the community with clear, timely information and the rationale for why we chose to conduct evacuations. So as these storms approach, the entire team gets together, we look at the risks, we collaborate, and we make a decision that's an informed decision on if public safety is in jeopardy, and then we make the decision and then we message it out. And in a perfect world, we can have information early enough to give timely notifications. So if we choose to do evacuations, you have enough time through the Ready, Set, Go model to prepare and then leave prior to when it's raining. So here's some of the other groups that sit at the table with us, and then I would like to bring back up the Fire PIO, Captain Berticelli, to talk about what they do from the fire side when we evaluate the risks with the impending storms.
All right, so from the fire department side of things, when the determination has been made for us to upstaff, it is supported by Cal OES, and what we do is we activate the incident management team, which is a unified command between public safety agencies in Santa Barbara County as well as OEM. And what we can do from the Santa Barbara County fire side of things is we can provide Type 3 fire engines, which are high clearance fire engines that are four-wheel drive capable, as well as having 3 to 4 firefighters on each one of those fire engines. Those fire engines are capable of driving off-road and through heavy mud and debris. We can also upstaff with our Urban Search and Rescue Regional Task Force, which includes swift water rescue teams. We will have helicopters that are hoist rescue capable with paramedics on board those helicopters, pre-positioned in the area. We'll have hand crews pre-positioned in the area for manpower in order to get work done in any capacity that's needed. And lastly, we will have other high clearance vehicles at our disposal through the California National Guard, which can carry upwards of 10 to 15 people. So that's what we do from the Santa Barbara County Fire side of things.
Next up, I'd like to bring Tom Fayrom up, talk a little bit about preparedness from flood control.
So I talked about what we've done leading up to this point. As we get into a rainy period, we obviously be watching our rain gauge network that I gave you the web page address for. But then also we have not only our own forces, but in situations like this, more importantly, our contractors. And so we have contracts in place right now. In fact, the clean out of the debris basin that I showed earlier was done by contractors. And all they are is a phone call away. And you may have heard us compliment our local contractors in the past, but they are truly our, they're our backup. And they come in and do the heavy lifting with the amount of equipment that they have at their disposal, the trucks, the excavators. And so at a moment's notice, as soon as it's safe to go in and do so, if we need to, we will go into either the debris basin or stream channels and do the clearing. And our goal is to get the stream channels opened up and ready for the next rainfall.
So next up, Cindy Ponce from California Highway Patrol.
Good evening. Thank you all so much for being here. In preparation for a storm, we are part of the decision-making team also. So we are sitting there with all of our partners from the county. And if a decision is made that we are taking protective actions and an evacuation order is called for, the California Highway Patrol does not plan to close the 154 or the 101 during an evacuation. We will closely monitor the storm, and if at any time there is a risk to public safety, at that time we would shut down the roadway in advance to keep people out of that area if there is a risk to public safety. However, we don't plan to do that ahead of time. So rest assured that we're going to do everything we can, working with our partners at Caltrans and the Sheriff's Department, to keep those roads open for you as long as they're safe to travel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Captain Ponce. Next up, we have Jim Shivers from Caltrans.
I think it's interesting from our perspective in that we try to do as much as we can before an incident. So that means clearing culverts, clearing drainage channels, eliminating large rocks that sit atop 154. We took a big one down just the other day. With all that said, We then simply have to wait and see what these rain events may or may not do to the state highway system. Our team of engineers are problem solvers by nature. We have found remedies for pretty much everything that Mother Nature has thrown our way. We are an active partner with the county and all of the people that you see here, and I just want to reiterate that if we do find ourselves in harm's way due to the impacts of Mother Nature, again, rest assured that our Caltrans District 5 management, our maintenance management, and all of our employees, engineers, maintenance are there to respond just like all of our other partners. Before I finish, if you're looking for real-time information, do take a look at our Caltrans Quick Map, which is an online resource. You can download that on your cell phone or mobile device. It's Caltrans Quick Map, one word. And we have a lot of information that goes out on our District 5, Caltrans District 5 Facebook page, our Caltrans District 5 Twitter page, and my own Twitter page at PIO Jim Shivers. We post photographs almost 24 hours a day, it seems. So if you're on the go, you have to move, you're looking for real-time information, Caltrans District 5 has Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I saw a lot of people writing down your Twitter address there. So next up, we're going to have Kelly Hubbard, our Director of the Office of Emergency Management, come up and talk a little bit about emergency preparedness.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. So I know we've been talking a little bit about the various aspects of what we've been working on with our technical teams that have come in. They're working on their reports. We're working on what us as public agencies will be doing with that and how we're going to communicate that out. But we do have some rainstorms that are coming in next week. And with the holidays, that's part of why we're having this meeting tonight, so that we could share with you what it is we do know right now. And so my part of the message is, how are we going to share that message? If anything does come in significant next week, although I was just double checking with Mark here, and it looks like we're having light storms next week. But so what I want to make sure of is that we're sharing the information, that you know how we're going to get this information out if those storms do come through, and what you can do to be personally resilient yourself. So how can you make sure you and your own community members are ready? So I'll talk a little bit about, how we're going to notify each of our community members and the individuals within these communities that may be impacted. So first and foremost, you want to make sure that you're registered at readysbc.org. And that's where we send a lot of our alerts out through. Now, we used to refer to that as Aware and Prepare. So if you registered at Aware and Prepare, same concept. We just are rebranding. Aware and Prepare has become this great statewide nonprofit, and so it's no longer our terminology that we get to use because they've been successful. And so Ready SBC is where you register to get those alerts. If you registered a long time ago, you're still in there, but I would recommend you go back and make sure your information's current. So maybe you've changed email addresses, maybe you have a different phone number. Make sure, maybe you moved and you thought, well, I still have the same phone number, but we send alerts based on your address. And so if you registered that address, that's how we're going to send those alerts and notifications out. So go in, make sure your information's current. Similarly, if you registered through Nixle, which is using when you text your zip code, that only tells us what zip code you live in. And so if we're sending messages that are a little bit more defined to a specific area, again, really good idea to go to that readysbc.org website, go to that link, and register more detailed information. What is your home address? You can register your work address. What is your email? What is your phone number for both phone calls and cell phone? And so we can get that more detailed information to you in as many ways as possible. We're going to do the wireless emergency alerts as noted. So those are the ones that go through the cell towers. We use that system. It's a federally provided system. And so sometimes if we hit a cell tower, it might get people outside of the area. So if you're thinking, well, I'm not really near that, it could be because that cell tower is nearby where you're at. But double check and make sure that that's not something that you need to pay attention to. Don't just assume you're getting it because you're driving past a cell tower. Listen, look at those pieces of information and see if it applies to you. We'll use emergency alert system. That's the beep, beep, beep that you see on your radio or on your TV. We'll do door-to-door notifications if needed. If we really feel that there's a really high impact or high concern for public safety, then sheriff and our public safety officials will go out and do door-to-door notifications if that's needed at that time. So again, readysbc.org, that's your best one-stop shop to make sure you're getting notifications when we try to put those out to the community. Other additional resources for information. Good. We want to communicate, reserve the use of 911 for emergency matters only. So if you're just trying to get more information, you're not sure what that message is that you got, you can call 211 is a great resource, readysbc.org. So anything that we put out through those notifications that you receive, we also immediately try to post to our readysbc.org. So that information is repeated on the website, as well as our agency social media accounts. So we try to get that out on the county social media, sheriff, fire. We all try to share that messaging that we're all pushing out on the various accounts. And so that's another good source to just verify that information and what is it that we're trying to communicate out to you. When we activate, so this phone number is not always active, that's why I don't have it up there. We do get it out through various sources, but we do an EOC call center. And so we will, when we activate, you've probably seen it or heard it before, we will activate that phone number and we will take those phone calls and try to get you additional information, answer your questions if you're not sure what you should be doing or what your community impacts are. Okay, and then always our local media partners, both television and radio, are a good source. We push that information. Our communications team and our Joint Information Center puts that information out to the media as quickly as we can. So those are your additional resources. So let's talk about personal resilience. And so I already talked about that registering for Ready SBC. National Weather Service talked about monitoring your weather reports and considering your safety risks. So making sure you're staying aware. If you know that there's some rain coming in, knowing where that is going, what it looks like. National Weather Service is also all over social media, and they have some great, they make sure to get that information out. Know all your local access roads and have an alternate plan or route. So if you know you live near a creek or a stream or a river, or maybe the way you normally commute to work crosses an area that you know you're going over a low bridge that you know, maybe it usually doesn't have water in it, but you notice every once in a while when it rains, there's some water in there. Figure out what your alternate routes are. Figure out maybe is there another way you can drive around? Can you turn the other way, go down a different street? Figure out what those routes are and be aware of those ahead of time. That's just another way you can be prepared that if those rains do come in, you're not sure how to get out of your community, you thought about that ahead of time, you know what those alternate streets are. Be prepared to leave, and if you need to, relocate early. So as Mark mentioned, that when that first advisory and warning goes out, or when that warning goes out, if you know that it takes you a little bit longer to pack up, if it takes you, maybe you need a little extra time, that's a really good time to start leaving and maybe go stay with a sister or a friend. But make sure that you're not staying somewhere where you don't feel comfortable. And that's part of that message is don't wait for us to tell you if it's necessary to leave. If at any point you don't feel safe, then leave. Go find a friend to stay with. Go to another community member that you know down the street. If you don't feel comfortable, don't wait for us to tell you that protective action. Take action until you feel comfortable. Okay? Never drive or walk into floodwaters or go around barricades. They're always there for a reason. Even if the water doesn't look very deep, it's typically there because it does have that potential to be dangerous. And so please don't go through those areas. Then, want to remind you and encourage you to work on protecting your property. So if you do live near those creeks or streams or in previous rainstorms, you've noticed that you get some flooding. I know, like my parents' house, their backyard doesn't drain very well. And so they know every storm season they have to put sandbags by their back door. So encourage you to take those protective actions now, even if they're not big rainstorms, right? Go out there. We heard about the sandbag information. The flood control has a lot of information on their website about erosion control and protection of property. There's a lot of resources on there. So go out, check those resources out, do some measures to protect your property now while it's dry. No one wants to do that in the rain. And just take those extra measures. Want to also point out, and FEMA did a press release on this, that flood insurance is often not part of your regular insurance program. So if you are in a flood risk area, consider reviewing your insurance and considering getting flood insurance. That is a general recommendation I'd make to any community member, just like I'd make a plug for earthquake insurance. No, not many people have that. I do. But it's that general recommendation that you should have that flood insurance if you live in those areas that have that potential for flooding. Not just because of this event, but because that's something to be aware of that your insurance often doesn't cover. Have an emergency kit and an emergency plan and a disaster kit. So that's your disaster kit at home, your water, your food. If you don't like cold soup, have a little camp stove or however you're going to heat that up, or granola bars. Have that first aid kit, your emergency supplies. That plan would include how are you going to talk to your family? How are you going to communicate that you're safe? Those types of things. How are you going to get out of your home if you need to evacuate, knowing those alternate routes? That's part of your emergency plan. A little bit different, pack an evacuation kit. So if you think you're in an area that you're worried about that flooding risk, have an evacuation kit. Have those important documents that you would need, your copies of your insurance, your credit cards, whatever those important concepts. Maybe it's the photos that you don't want to ever lose in your home, right? That go kit. What is it that you're going to want to take if you have to leave quickly? Have that packed and ready. That's a little bit different than your emergency kit that has your supplies that you might need. And then lastly, I want to encourage you all to be community members that talk and work and communicate with your members in your neighborhoods and those around you. So if you know that you have a single family father next door who has 3 kids that he's going to have to pack up, then maybe go knock on that door and make sure they're doing okay. Don't assume that your neighbor got the message that we sent out. Hopefully everyone in your neighborhood registers at Ready SBC, but maybe they haven't, or maybe their phone was dead and so they didn't get the message. Go and share that message when it goes out. Make sure your neighbors know, make sure that they're okay, check in on them and be part of your community's resilience. Help each other out, make sure you're all ready, and just be part of that team to help you guys be better prepared as a community. And so that's what I have. I'm going to turn it back over to Matt to wrap us up.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, next steps. So the next steps are we are going to continue to evaluate our information that's coming in. You heard a lot of information tonight from our work team and about the BEAR team and our other technical experts that are looking into the conditions above us here and below the cave fire. We're going to base our decisions on mapping if it's necessary. We're going to have pre-identified areas and measures and protective actions that are needed. All those things will be made. And we're going to communicate all this information to you. So as you can see behind me, we have these agencies available here tonight. In addition to that, we have Poncho here from the U.S. Forest Service, who's also here and ready to answer questions that you might have. And so I would encourage you, as we kind of conclude this meeting, to come up. We're going to have all of them up here in the room, and they will be available to you if you have flood questions. Obviously, our representatives from flood control are here, public safety professionals are here, Caltrans, National Weather Service, Office of Emergency Management. And I want to do a special thanks to all of you who came down tonight or who tuned in on the web or on TV to watch us tonight and be part of this information sharing. Also, another thanks to our interpreters, Carla and Simone, and our friends at the ILRC, Katie and Robin, our electeds from our county, our city of Goleta that are here tonight, and from Congress, from our congressman's office. And also thanks again for all the agencies that came down tonight to be part of this. So with that, I'm going to wrap up, and please come forward if you have questions. We've got all of our folks here tonight to get you the right answers. Thank you very much for coming. The video is also, for this, in case you want to go back and watch it, is on YouTube under the County of Santa Barbara's channel. Thank you.